So the Nintendo Direct just finished up. It was a little over 40 minutes long, and there were actually a bunch of games that were announced here, more than 30 from my count. So tomorrow in Newswave, I'll go over everything line by line. Here, I just wanted to give some of my immediate thoughts and just some of my general sweeping reactions to everything that just went on, because, again, there was a lot of stuff, but there were definitely some highlights, and after years and years, we finally got our first real look at Metroid Prime 4. So we'll talk about that here today. So if you guys enjoy this video, hit that like button, subscribe if you're new, and of course, let me know your thoughts on the Direct as I go through it here down in the comments section. But they did start off, I think, pretty strong with a new Mario and Luigi game, that being Brothership. And this is the first new entry in almost 9 years, as they said. I feel like a lot of people believe that this game, the series, was just done. Like, it was over after Alpha Dream shut down, but it looks like Nintendo is continuing on with it, and that is coming out November 7th. So while we did have 2025 releases mentioned in this showcase, that definitely lean more towards, hey, here's games that are coming out by the end of this year to kind of fill out their holiday season, as you would expect from Nintendo. They do still have a pretty lofty goal of, I think, over 13 million Switch systems they're trying to sell this fiscal year. So naturally, they want to try to at least have something going on leading up to the end of March 2025 when their fiscal year will be ending. Now, I'm going to jump pretty far ahead here. Again, there's a lot of stuff that was gone over in this presentation, a lot of third-party stuff too. But Donkey Kong Country Returns HD, this is a game from the Wii generation. Good game, by the way. Almost people were looking at that as being like kind of a reemergence, you could say, of Donkey Kong Country after Donkey Kong, like Conga and stuff that we did on the GameCube. But they are including levels from the 3DS. It's more than 80 levels total then, and that is coming out to start off 2025 in January. So we already knew that there would be ports and remasters from previous generations. Nintendo, of course, working to have that included for that cross-generation period, that bridge to their next system, which I kind of think this is the last presentation we're going to have that's solely Switch oriented. I think the next Direct we have will incorporate their new system in some way. So we will have Directs where it'll be Switch and Switch 2 related. So I'm thinking that's coming up probably September, October. But Dragon Quest 3 HD 2D remake and Dragon Quest 1 and 2 HD 2D. So this is something we heard, but we kind of heard, this came from Midori, so again, who knows now, but that they were at least going to do something with 1 and 2. So the order goes 3, 1, 2. They outline that in the show here, kind of the order to play them in. That's why they're going this route. But Dragon Quest 3 is coming out November 14th, and then it will follow up with 1 and 2 HD2D in 2025. On the Super Famicom, they had Dragon Quest 3, which is where this is coming from, this remake, and then they did a double pack of 1 and 2, and they had moved that to like 16-bit and stuff. I wonder if they're doing that same thing here, because they kind of flashed the title card up like it was 1 and 2. So I'm thinking that's just a singular title and based off of that Super Famicom version, but they have time. It's not coming out to 2025. They have to get 3 out first, so I'm sure they'll detail that as they get closer. The only disappointing aspect to this is kind of was hoping for a demo. I know it's technically a known game, but I thought it would have been fun to just throw a demo out there so people could get this in front of them, maybe even today if they were able to sort of shadow drop that. Not the case. November 14th, though, so not too far away. We are getting it this year. Now I'm going to jump ahead to Nintendo Switch Online games, and this is a fun surprise for the show, a shadow drop. In fact, I think these games are already available, but we got Game Boy Advanced and Nintendo 64 games. The funny thing with N64 is these are mature-rated games, right? So they have them in a 17-plus section. That is official. They are going that route and presenting it as such. But that's Turok and Perfect Dark. What an awesome entry for Perfect Dark. Turok, we'll see how that's aged for people when they turn it on. I still think Turok is a landmark game, especially for that time, but now we'll see. But Perfect Dark, still an awesome title to play to this day. The only thing with the N64 is the frame rate is rough, especially with 4 players. We do have it on the Xbox, like they did Perfect Dark there. But this, of course, being on NSO, will be running through an N64 emulator and giving us, I guess, more of a, I guess you could say a true experience. I'm curious about the controls, though, because that's something that came up for GoldenEye. But Perfect Dark did work to kind of build out the controls a little more with dual analog sticks kind of in mind. You'd use like 2 64 controllers. I'm curious if they had some feedback maybe on what happened with GoldenEye, and maybe they're able to play around with Perfect Dark a bit more. But Rare just keeps coming through. Shout out to Rare with NSO. They have no problem getting these games on there. And that is still an awesome game, as I mentioned, to this day. And I fully recommend people checking it out. For Game Boy Advance, Link to the Past 4 Swords. We already have Link to the Past on there, but this is technically a different version on the Game Boy Advance. And Metroid Zero Mission, just rounding out the Metroid games on that service. Again, awesome entry there. Here's a surprising one. Marvel vs. Capcom Fighting Collection. I need to see the entire list of games for this, but they did show off Marvel vs. Capcom 2, which clearly caught everyone's attention because it was delisted like a decade ago, and now it's making its return in this collection. Online multiplayer, the whole thing. And they showed like Street Fighter vs. X-Men was in there. There are a bunch of different games, right? So while I'm not as familiar with all the other fighting games of that era, Marvel vs. Capcom 2 is like iconic. So I noticed that and I was like, oh, that's a big deal. And then they also had Punisher in there. They mentioned there's co-op for it, and they can go through and pick all the different sounds, which naturally they played some stuff from MVC2 that most people will remember, and that is coming out 2024. So again, I'm not a big fighting game person. Even I might pick that one up just for the nostalgia factor and kind of how big of a deal it is for Marvel vs. Capcom 2 to be returning. We did have Super Mario Party. I'm going to kind of jump past that, though, and go to The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom. What a surprising reveal here, because when it first came up and they're showing it looked like the remake we had for Link's Awakening, and I was almost wondering, okay, is this going to be them taking A Link Between Worlds and maybe remaking that in some way, when they just showed the initial like image of it, and here's Link coming in with that same art style, but then it quickly flipped to where you are controlling Zelda in this game, and it doesn't look like it plays anything like a typical top-down Zelda game. It's not really action-oriented in the sense that you're running around with a sword and shield and all kinds of other gadgets and stuff. No, in this case, it's more of a puzzle game where you have this staff that can create copies of items that you find in the world, and they showed a bunch of different examples where you were using a table to be able to get up to a higher ledge. They were using a bed to bridge the gap from one side to the other, which I guess it also doesn't follow the laws of physics technically, as they were stacking one on the other, making almost a stair step. But then you can also create copies of enemies. So depending on what's in front of you, what enemies you come across, you'll then technically have them as your allies, and you can use them to then battle. So I got some like Overlord vibes in there almost, that if you remember that, where you would technically have a bunch of minions running around helping you out, although this looked more like you had maybe one or two summoned at a time. It is a very, very different take, and it's a direction that I am very curious about. So yes, I'll be picking this one up, and it's coming out September 26th. So another instance of, here's this new interesting concept, and it's out in just over 3 months. Like I do like how we're seeing that happen more and more just in gaming in general. So really cool stuff there. I do have to point this out. Lego Horizon Adventures was there. It's very weird to see Sony participate in a direct Aloy there front and center. I almost wondered if they were going to reveal the release date here, but they didn't. It was just really an ad spot basically of like, hey, don't forget this game. It's coming to the Switch, and that's going to be one to watch just to see how it sells on the Switch, even versus PlayStation. This might be a big, this is an experiment for Sony, but it could be the starting off point to where maybe they look towards other franchises that make their way over. So interesting to keep an eye on that one. And then the big closeout, it was indeed Metroid Prime 4. Now we have a name for it, Metroid Prime 4 Beyond. It is coming out next year, though. There have been speculation that maybe this is their holiday game. It's not. And to me, it's getting into the position where this might as well be a cross-gen game at this point. I mean, it's going to be strange if it comes out a month before Nintendo's next system, even a month after, and it does not have something that takes advantage of that new platform. You might as well, especially since a lot of these Nintendo games tend to be evergreen, and this will probably have sales that'll run through that new system launching. Like, in terms of being on the charts and stuff, to me, you might as well hold it and have it as a game that was similar to Breath of the Wild when that came out on the Wii U and the Switch day one. As long as it releases on the Switch, who cares? Put it on the next system too. And by the way, the reaction to this is very, very telling that Retro Studios, they still got it. We saw kind of a glimpse of that with Metroid Prime Remastered, but this game looks super impressive from what they showed. And it was through like stream quality and stuff, so I'll have to go back and look at the official trailer when it gets uploaded at 1080p 60, which, by the way, I initially looked at the stream, and I feel like Nintendo does this all the time anyway. I saw 1080p 60 when they first started the stream, and I was like, that's interesting. Metroid Prime is supposed to run at 60, and it looked like it was running at a higher frame rate when they did show the gameplay off, and it was visually impressive. I went on social media as I was finishing up the direct and taking notes and stuff, just to put out a quick tweet, just quick thought, like, hey, this is a pretty good direct. And I'm looking at people like, is this footage from the next system? This can't be the Switch, right? That's how you know Retro Studios got it figured out here. I mean, it's impressive stuff. It really is from what they showed. Small glimpses, though, so we still need to learn a lot more about this. They had some quick shots of Samus, so I'm curious where they take this game, what direction they take it in. So really cool stuff there overall to close out what I thought was a pretty good direct from top to bottom. Sure, there were some lower points where of course there's a farming game in here, but at least that was even kind of interesting, where you're growing your monsters. Like, it's different, I guess. And they were pretty quick. I mean, like I said, there were over 30 games here, so you almost had one game every single minute, and that's not even splitting up the NSO announcements, right? With those games, to do that, it might be closer to 40 titles that were shown off here with updates or announcements or release dates. So it was a pretty quick moving direct, a lot of stuff happening here. So for me, this was probably one of the better directs or presentations you can hold for a system that is in its 8th year. If you consider that kind of context, I think it was pretty good. But let me know what your guys' thoughts are on the direct down below. I will, of course, run a poll, just kind of having the community rate this direct, and I'll give some of my more thoughts around everything that was shown here tomorrow morning, Newswave, 8 a.m. Eastern Time, and I'll see you guys then.